German engineers were convinced their trucks and armored vehicles, such as the 3-ton Opel Blitz and the 8-wheeled Est. KFZ 232 armored car, would maintain Axis superiority in the North African desert. They declared American vehicles too light and fragile for the deep sand and broken terrain. In November 1941, as the British Eighth Army watched, Axis officers openly mocked the Willys MB Jeep, an untested, compact, four-wheel drive utility car from the United States, claiming it would bog down in dunes where heavier German vehicles triumphed. The Americans, however, had engineered a tactical surprise. Initial trials confirmed the Jeep's specifications: a 60-horsepower, 2.2-liter inline-4 engine, lightweight 1250-kilogram frame, and four-wheel drive with 80 inches of ground clearance. Production lines in the United States achieved unparalleled output, shipping over 650,000 units by war's end. By contrast, the Opel Blitz, though fielded in more than 70,000 units, suffered wheelspin and engine overheating in shifting terrain. Jeep convoys began traversing over 100 miles of sand and rocky escarpment, carrying wounded men and vital supplies where German trucks stalled, even over dunes considered impassable. German skepticism shifted to concern as Jeep columns bypassed roadblocks, delivering ammunition and medical teams directly to the forward elements of the U.S. 1st Armored Division. Intelligence officers reported increased Allied mobility, unable to explain the speed at which American supply lines regenerated. The critical factor was not brute force, but design suited to the environment. The moment European engineering met American adaptation, expectations were upended. This documentary reveals, step by step, how the Jeep changed operational doctrine in the Western Desert. November 8, 1942, 400 hours. Major General George S. Patton ordered the 1st Armored Division to land at Safi, Morocco, with the objective of rapidly advancing inland to capture Casablanca, 230 kilometers to the north. Patton's force included the 3rd Infantry Division, elements of the 1st Armored Regiment, and support units fielding 192 Willys MB Jeeps, 120 M3 Stuart light tanks, and supply trains using GMC CCKW2 a half-ton trucks. On the opposing side, Generaloberst Erwin Rommel commanded Afrika Korps armored and motorized infantry formations, including the 21st Panzer Division and the 90th Light Afrika Division. These units were distributed across defensive positions near the coastal road from Safi to Marrakesh, with screening patrols operating Mercedes-Benz Type 170 VK cars and over 450 Opel Blitz trucks. Axis defensive doctrine relied on anti-tank gun emplacements, 75 mm Paquet 40, mobile artillery, and well-prepared stop lines to prevent rapid Allied movement. Allied planners expected slow Axis response, based on prior North African engagements and intelligence suggesting German supply vehicles struggled in deep sand beyond marked roads. British General Harold Alexander's staff calculated armored columns could advance at 3 kilometers per hour across the interior, underestimating the impact of rough terrain on both sides. The perceived lack of mobility inside the desert led to a risk-averse initial plan for supply over known routes. Reconnaissance from the 81st Reconnaissance Battalion on November 5 reported sand ridges averaging 14 feet high and stretches of loose gravel for up to 30 kilometers. However, this did not account for the Jeep's four-wheel drive performance or the poor traction suffered by Opel Blitz trucks beyond 8% grade slopes. Unpredictable winds created shifting dunes, and average midday temperatures reached 38 degrees C, complicating engine cooling and tire grip. For the next 48 hours, Allied outcomes would depend entirely on cross-desert mobility and real-time adaptation to these technical and geographic obstacles. At 4:30 hours, the 1st Willys MB Jeep columns left the landing zone at Safi, each towing an M337 anti-tank gun and carrying 4-man crews loaded with M1 Garand rifles, 30 caliber Browning machine guns, and 60 liters of water. 5 miles inland, Lieutenant Colonel William H. Kyle of the 1st Armored Regiment led 30 jeeps across a 40-meter wide sand ridge rising 12 feet above ground level. German defensive positions. Major Karl Friedrich Bose at point 117 coordinated defensive fire from Paquet 40 anti-tank guns. Effective range 1,800 meters, 75 mm caliber, supported by MG-42 machine guns firing 1,200 rounds per minute. Axis trucks attempted to redeploy, but bogged down in soft sand after 2 kilometers. By 600 hours, Allied jeeps had advanced 18 kilometers, suffering 4 vehicles disabled by enemy shellfire. Axis roadblocks were bypassed, with supplies reaching 1st Battalion, 6th Infantry at the front line without delay. Meanwhile, at 6:20 hours, Technical Sergeant Robert L. Jennings of the 81st Reconnaissance Battalion reported that the GMC CCKW trucks stalled attempting a 10% incline of loose gravel, requiring winch extraction. This delayed resupply by 15 minutes. At 700 hours, Signals Officer Hauptmann Heinz Lotzi at Axis Observation Post Dora intercepted radio traffic, indicating Jeep-mounted units flanking east. The message outlined Allied units moving at 7 kilometers per hour over broken terrain, an unanticipated maneuver, allowing them to reach positions behind Axis-blocking forces. Rommel's staff remained unaware of the true cross-country range now achieved. With wind at 20 km/h and visibility to 16 kilometers due to airborne sand, Axis gunners struggled to spot advance elements. At 7:15 hours, a Jeep column leveraged its compact profile to cross a 5-meter defile, moving within range of point 117. Rommel, acting on incomplete reports, ordered counterattacks redirected southwest toward the main road. By 7:30 hours, the established Axis stop line had been outflanked, and Allied logistical support outpaced German redeployment. At 7:34 hours, Lieutenant Colonel William H. Kyle of the 1st Armored Regiment observed a critical technical discrepancy as his Jeep column advanced to grid reference ZB-176. Using a prismatic compass and odometer readings, Kyle recorded that his 30 Jeeps, spread across a 280-meter sector, maintained an average cross-country speed of 8.2 kilometers per hour over 12 kilometers of alternating sand and gravel ridges. 2 Opel Blitz trucks from the nearby German 21st Panzer Supply Detachment had stalled, their rear axles embedded over 24 centimeters in the soft surface. Kyle's after-action log, radioed to the 3rd Infantry Division Command post by 7:42 hours, documented the abnormal disparity in mobility. At that terrain grade and composition, American intelligence projected no Allied vehicle would exceed 4 kilometers per hour. The Jeep's ongoing progress, confirmed by 3 separate patrol leaders, reflected a 2-fold increase over the planned operational tempo. Technical Sergeant Robert L. Jennings relayed this information up the chain by SCR 610 set, flagging it as a deviation requiring immediate doctrinal adjustment. At 7:45 hours, Major David Blanton of the 3rd Infantry Division received the updated Jeep speed and performance data. This enabled Blanton to redirect 2 additional Jeep sections to bypass an Axis roadblock at grid reference YC201. 9 Jeeps and 33 men executed the maneuver, supported by M3 Stuart tanks on the left flank and a directed 81 mortar fire mission. Resulting orders accelerated the main supply column by 22% for the next scheduled supply drop at 8:30 hours, cutting projected resupply delay to frontline companies from 4 hours to just 135 minutes. On the German side, Lieutenant Otto Delling, commanding a section of the 21st Panzer Division's logistical convoy, realized at 7:50 hours that his unit was immobilized and isolated 1.3 kilometers east of point 117. Wehrmacht drivers attempted to offload Opel Blitz cargo, lighten axles, and use sand ladders, yet 3 of 4 vehicles failed to regain traction. Radio communication with Hauptmann Lotzi at Observation Post Dora was intermittent amid sand interference, further impeding German coordination and delaying reinforcement by at least 30 minutes. By 800 hours, reports of Jeep maneuverability reached Allied command posts across the 1st Armored Regiment, the 3rd Infantry Division, and the 81st Reconnaissance Battalion. Simultaneously, immobilization was confirmed along the entire 21st Panzer Division's southern supply line. Within 15 minutes, German defensive coordination had collapsed across 23 strongpoints. The Willys MB Jeep, issued en masse to U.S. forces, was designed to operate efficiently in rough, variable terrain. Its Go Devil L134 engine produced 60 horsepower at 4,000 RPM, with a BorgWarner T84 3-speed gearbox delivering torque to all four wheels. The Goodyear 6.0x16 military NDT tires offered deep tread for grip, and the live axle leaf spring suspension could absorb terrain impacts while maintaining ground clearance of 203 mm. However, the Opel Blitz 36-36S truck was engineered for hard-packed surfaces and gradients under 8%. Its 3.6-liter inline-six engine provided only 68 horsepower to the rear axle, with leaf spring suspension and 2 WD. When tire ground pressure exceeded 0.62 kg/cm2 on shifting sand, the Blitz would bog down. Engine cooling systems designed for 28 degrees C ambient temperatures frequently overheated above 35 degrees C, causing power loss. German testing at the Kummersdorf Proving Ground in 1938 never simulated ascents over loose sand at 10% or more, leaving major mobility gaps unaddressed. Key technical failures included tire slippage, excessive weight-to-power ratio, and high axle loads, 1850 kg at the rear axle of loaded trucks. Strategically, Rommel's doctrine mandated reliance on established roads for armored movement. At 500 hours on November 8, Oberst Karl Bircher approved defensive deployment along the Route National 6 corridor based on Fremd Heer West Report FHW 2374, NAV. 1, which asserted American vehicle mobility averaged less than 3.5 kph over dunes. This matched 1941 battles along the Hafja Pass, where German trucks advanced at 4 kph over compacted terrain. Current desert conditions, loose, shifting sand and multi-degree slopes, rendered the doctrine inapplicable, preventing effective bypass or flanking. WHD 223, Allgemeine Heeresvorschrift, instructed artillery and supply units to avoid terrain exceeding 7% grade, but operational necessity forced German columns onto marginal ground, straining vehicles beyond design specs. Captured 21st Panzer Division maintenance logs from November 9, 1942, documented that 32% of Opel Blitz trucks were immobilized in sand between grid references ZB170 and YC210. Rommel's evening dispatch on November 8 described unexpected Allied cross-desert advances exceeding 7 kph, and called for an immediate review of materiel allocation. Interrogation of Oberleutnant Heinz Goebbels in 1946 corroborated these accounts, noting that expected supply loop times tripled during the engagement. British General Staff Analysis, WO 205-142, compared this to the 1941 Bardia operation. American Jeep convoys had fivefold the cross-desert coverage, while German truck effectiveness fell by over 60%. Localized Allied technical superiority became the decisive factor. Colonel Dudley Ross's 1st Battalion, 6th Infantry immediately launched an outflanking probe at 8:05 hours, employing 14 Jeep-mounted elements supported by one M3 Stuart platoon. Within 25 minutes, Allied reach extended 3.8 kilometers beyond the original stop line. Casualty evac increased. 6 wounded from Company C were extracted to the regimental aid station within 31 minutes, a process that had previously required over 2 hours due to terrain rigidity. This rapid mobility enabled the surprise seizure of Axis supply dumps at grid YC213 and forced the withdrawal of an entire German machine gun platoon guarding point 117. Brigadier General Lucien Truscott at the 3rd Infantry Division, HQ, received confirmation at 8:12 hours and ordered the 2nd Battalion forward along a newly scouted ridge bypass. This change redirected 430 infantry, 16 jeeps, and supporting mortars from a frontal assault on point 117 to a lateral maneuver targeting German positions, rear slopes. Tactical doctrine was revised within 15 minutes, and quartermaster units shifted 28 Jeep loads of ammunition from primary to secondary axes. Major Blanton, commanding the lead element, adjusted fire support plans with 81 mortar barrages coordinated to suppress retreating German units. By 900 hours, Allied columns had advanced 76 kilometers past projected objectives, capturing Point 117 more than 2 hours ahead of original estimates. Casualty expectations dropped from 41 to 17 in the lead battalion, a 58% reduction attributed to Jeep-facilitated rapid maneuver and evacuation capacity. Operation Torch's southern advance gained an estimated 25 hours, enabling Allied consolidation at forward points. Post-campaign Allied analysis estimated 150 personnel casualties averted, and the accelerated breakthrough allowed resupply to elements staging for the next phase by noon. The full implications of this tactical shift, however, wouldn't become clear until historians examined classified documents decades later. Documents recovered in 1997 revealed an unpublished field diary from Staff Sergeant Alphonse DiMaggio, 3rd Infantry Division, who participated in the initial Jeep crossing near Safi. DiMaggio wrote on November 8, 1942, "We watched the Blitz lorries sink axle deep while our MBs hummed past, boys singing. Command said the Germans should have cut us off, but their trucks moved like dead whales against the sand." This account contradicted the official Allied summary, which attributed the speed of advance solely to staff planning, not enemy immobilization. The discrepancy was due to wartime censorship to protect technical intelligence. This detail remained unknown until the National Archives declassification in 1997. Supply records from the 1st Armored Regiment Quartermaster Section, logged on November 8, 1942, show that fuel allocation fell short by 18%. Jeeps allotted for the advance were supposed to have 90 full jerry cans. Actual inventory, 74. The 17% shortfall affected the ability to sustain bypass operations past Point 117. Quartermaster LT Francis Riley reported the shortage to Division HQ, but the urgency was not relayed due to concerns of Axis radio interception. This logistical constraint led to direct reliance on captured German stores, limiting operational reach in the decisive hours before Casablanca's approach. The November 9, 1942, after-action report stated that only 4 Jeeps were lost crossing the ridges, with no additional casualties. However, Wehrmacht 21st Panzer Division reports captured later that month reference the disabling or capture of 12 Jeeps. Medical logs from the Divisional Aid Station confirm 7 severely wounded men from Jeep crews, a 75% discrepancy compared to the official report. Historian Christopher Shores's 2003 research, using consolidated German and U.S. division diaries, uncovered post-action editing to maintain public morale. This redacted casualty figure changed the accepted narrative of Allied mobility's apparent costlessness. While Allied plans focused on rapid envelopment, soldiers at Grid ZB-182 encountered dense minefields and soft, shell-pocked sand. Private Sidney Grossman, 6th Infantry, improvised by equipping his Jeep with scavenged panzer tracks for traction, lashing them to the rear wheels with signal cable. This solution allowed his group to cross a 30-meter soft patch previously judged impassable. Such improvisations surfaced in over 20 similar field interviews. Strategic doctrine had underplayed localized obstacles, which platoons frequently solved independently at standard orders didn't reflect such flexibility until after the Safi engagement. Weather data from RAF Coastal Command for November 8, 1942, shows wind gusts averaged 21 km/h, sustained from the southeast, with sand-laden air limiting visibility to 1.2 km and temperatures at 37.4 degrees C at 900 hours. Allied planners based movement estimates on clear conditions at 28 degrees C. The 9.4 degrees C higher temperature led to multiple Jeep engine overheat trial records, showed a 19% reduction in engine efficiency above 35 degrees C. Standard Willys MB specs rated performance at up to 32 degrees C. Operations above this threshold caused boiling radiators and temporary immobilization, a factor fully documented only after the campaign during U.S. Ordnance Board post-war reviews. These overlooked details aligned with evidence historians found in recently released German and Allied operational files from 1942 to 43. Post-war analysis completed in 1948 concluded that the rapid Allied advance at Safi was due primarily to well-executed staff plans and superior numbers. Colonel T.J. Sheehan's 1952 study, Torch Tactics, argued that mechanical advantage was secondary to leadership quality, using U.S. Army reports and Allied command diaries as the principal sources. The official U.S. Army history, published in 1957, asserted that only minor logistical issues delayed progress and that Allied casualties were negligible. For nearly 30 years, this interpretation prevailed, largely unchallenged due to lack of access to Axis records and classified technical data. Early research methods relied almost entirely on Allied perspectives and redacted operational summaries. Declassification of captured Wehrmacht operational and maintenance records in 1978 changed this assessment. Historian Richard Lakeland's 1981 examination of these German archives revealed chronic vehicle immobilization and misreporting of Jeep losses. For example, German documents described 3/4 of supply trucks immobilized in a single morning. Jeep units left us behind in dust. Comparing this engagement to the earlier 1941 battle at Bardia. At Bardia, German trucks advanced at 4 kph over firm sand. Here, their trucks suffered 32% immobilization, and Jeep columns exceeded 8 kph. The crucial difference was tire pressure and four-wheel drive design, giving the Jeep operational superiority in terrain where the Blitz faltered. This comparison refocused analysis on environmental adaptation as a decisive factor. Research published in 2019 using full Allied, Axis, and recently digitized medical records calculated Jeep losses at 14 vehicles. Previous estimates ran at 4 or 5, a revision exceeding 200%. Casualty numbers concurrently rose from official Allied claims of 6 to a documented 17 wounded, a 183% increase. Historian Ann Kelly contends that Allied underreporting stemmed from morale concerns, while Eugen Bach, drawing on German maintenance logs, suggests both sides minimized loss for propaganda. Mainstream consensus, supported by the U.S. Army's 2020 operations study, confirms German immobilization rates and revised Allied casualty figures through cross-referenced primary sources. Debate now centers on the question of whether doctrine or improvisational adaptation made the key tactical difference, shaping analysis of wider mobile operations in North Africa. Franklin Frank Ortiz, technical sergeant, 6th Infantry Regiment, age 24, from El Paso, Texas, was stationed near Point 117 on November 8, 1942. Before the war, Ortiz operated a family auto repair shop, skills which led to his posting as a Jeep section chief. At 700 hours, Ortiz's Jeep was struck by small arms fire at the base of a sand ridge while maneuvering to extract wounded infantry. In a 1990 interview, Ortiz recalled, "We couldn't wait for orders. With rounds pinging off the frame, I told my boys, we get them now or we leave them behind. We lashed stretchers across the hood and made 2 trips. His leadership saved 4 wounded men. His Jeep was disabled after the second run, leaving him with shrapnel wounds to both legs and earning the Silver Star." Ortiz returned to Texas in 1945, resuming work as a mechanic. At 70, interviewed again, he reflected, "It's not the heroics, it's doing what's needed so someone gets home." He died in 1998 in El Paso. His oral history is archived at the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center. Lieutenant Dieter Albrecht, 21st Panzer Division, experienced the Jeep breakthrough from an exposed roadblock north of Safi. Captured after his armored car became bogged in soft sand, his interrogation on November 10, 1942, revealed confusion about Allied movement, reporting, "We couldn't believe how far behind our flanks the Jeeps appeared. Orders were to stand, but nothing moved but the enemy." Post-war, Albrecht returned to Bremen, where he wrote a memoir describing his surprise at Allied cross-country tactics. His account confirmed the reality of Jeep mobility, but denied knowledge of technical failures until after his capture. Private Harold Ingram, 3rd Infantry Division, was among those evacuated from the front by Jeep after suffering a leg wound in the initial advance. He recalled prolonged pain and fear, but rapid extraction likely saved his limb. Post-war medical records from 1944 list Ingram's case as one of 17 North African veterans diagnosed with combat trauma and complications, early diagnosis of combat fatigue. Ingram struggled with chronic pain, but became a union organizer for war amputees. His testimony contributed to the American Battle Monuments Commission's post-war research, whose findings shaped early veteran disability policy. These individual experiences, when examined across hundreds of documented cases, revealed patterns that affected Allied doctrine concerning evacuation and post-war care. Within 15 minutes of Lieutenant Colonel William H. Kyle's Jeep columns reporting cross-country speeds exceeding expectations at 800 hours on November 8, 1942, the operational tempo of the Allied 1st Armored Division increased measurably. Brigadier General Lucien Truscott at the 3rd Infantry Division headquarters received verification of Jeep mobility at 8:12, prompting an immediate directive. Additional Jeep sections and 430 troops were diverted to exploit a terrain bypass previously deemed impassable. This realignment covered over 6 kilometers of new ground. Quartermaster units rerouted 28 Jeep loads of ammunition, requiring logistical recalculation engineers now distributed 12 extra water trailers and reduced heavy truck assignments. By 900 hours, the division's advance had achieved a 2-3-fold increase in reach relative to pre-maneuver plans, with Point 117 falling 2 hours ahead of original estimates. Within 48 hours, operational plans across the Western Task Force Zone were rewritten. Operation Torch objectives scheduled for November 10 were accelerated by nearly a full day due to the newfound rapidity of Allied cross-desert movement. Brigadier General Charles Ryder revised the allocation of 38 Jeep convoys, reassigning them from supply to rapid casualty evacuation, a change covering 5 battalions. However, this speed came at a cost. 3 M3 Stuart tank platoons scheduled for a direct assault at Point 117 were placed in reserve, reducing armored support for the push toward Marrakesh by 2 companies. Projected casualty figures were revised. Original estimate, 82. Actual, 35, a 57% reduction attributed to fast Jeep-enabled evacuation and flanking. Water and fuel resupply shifted. Standard 150 fuel cans delivered dropped to 120, but mobility gains enabled quicker distribution, compensating with only a 12% supply shortfall. By December 1, 1942, the outcome of the broader Morocco campaign reflected these advantages. The key Safi-Marrakech corridor was secured by Allied forces on November 13, 5 days ahead of schedule. This early consolidation enabled the launch of Operation Blackstone south toward Marrakesh to proceed without delay, shifting the axis of advance to capitalize on the immobilization of German supply columns. The Axis defensive line, once anchored at Route National 6, remained broken until Rommel's forces withdrew on December 11. This domino effect influenced 6 subsequent Allied operations across a 6-week period, from rapid resupply at Casablanca to the eventual outflanking of Tunis. Promotions and commendations followed. Truscott received an immediate divisional promotion, and 4 battalion commanders in the Jeep columns were cited for valor. By January, the U.S. Army's North African doctrine formally adopted mobile Jeep teams for flanking maneuvers across all mechanized regiments. The larger strategic picture shifted accordingly. Allied operations, originally planned for January 1943 in North Africa, such as the drive toward Kasserine Pass, commenced as early as December 29, a net timeline advance of 18 days. The Allies acquired firm control over 14,700 square kilometers of southwestern Morocco by mid-December, instead of the projected January 5 timetable. Equipment the equivalent of 230 Jeeps and 48 Stuart tanks was released for redeployment on the Tunisian front, directly augmenting Operation Al-Bodal. On a theater scale, the mobility innovations at Safi invalidated Axis assumptions about desert defense. By January 1943, German planners had lost not only ground but freedom of maneuver, allowing Operation Torch's subsequent stages to proceed under conditions never envisaged in pre-campaign assessments. These operational shifts informed strategic decisions at the highest levels of command throughout the Western Desert Campaign in 1942–43. Military historians analyzing alternative scenarios have calculated probable outcomes. If the Jeep's cross-desert performance at Safi on November 8, 1942, had not delivered double the expected speed and effectiveness, the Allied timetable would have been drastically affected. The main advance on Casablanca could not have commenced until December 1, approximately 18 days later than the actual November 13 capture. This timeline is based on logistics models showing fuel and water allocation insufficient for sustained bypass maneuvers with existing truck and tank assets. Historian Ann Kelly's 2019 study projected that, had the Jeep failed to achieve over 8 km/h cross-country, fallback on armored trucks or foot supply would have resulted in an additional 400 to 650 Allied casualties due to protracted exposure, delayed evacuation, and less effective flanking. Territorial control calculations indicate the Safi-Marrakech corridor would have remained contested under Axis control until mid-December, more than 4 weeks longer than historical reality. This estimate is grounded in captured German supply logs, which show that immobilization allowed a much quicker Allied push than otherwise possible. Strategically, Afrika Korps units would have been able to conduct a fighting withdrawal, preserving combat power for a robust defense at the outskirts of Casablanca. This would, in turn, have slowed Operation Blackstone's start by up to 10 days, affecting the opening of the broader North African campaign. Comparing the Jeep's cross-desert breakthrough at Safi to other North African engagements. At Safi, 700 Allied troops maneuvered 30 kilometers over 36 hours, achieving a 2-hour timeline gain and a 57% casualty reduction. The Battle of Bardia in 1941 involved 5,300 troops advancing 12 kilometers in heavy sand over 48 hours, with only minimal operational tempo improvements realized, resulting in 197 casualties. El Alamein 1942 saw 230,000 troops over 120 kilometers during 2 weeks fighting, with timeline gains of less than a day and 13,560 casualties. The U.S. Army Command and General Staff College and the British Staff College have incorporated Safi into curriculum for lessons in environmental adaptation and mobility. University of London Research, 2020 determined 28% of North African operations felt the impact of Safi mobility, compared to 42% affected by El Alamein. Historian Richard Lakeland's 1981 Comparative Metrics ranked Safi third among 9 decisive North African operations based on mobility, casualty ratio, and timeline. The academic consensus is now firmly rooted in the cross-comparison of Allied and Axis archival sources. The U.S. Army Center of Military History supports the view that mechanical advantage and environmental adaptation trumped numerical superiority as the defining elements at Safi, using comparative casualty and timeline analysis as evidence. Eugen Bach's German-focused study upholds this, pointing to identical immobilization statistics in Wehrmacht after-action reports. The debate still considers the weight of improvisation versus formalized doctrine, but declassified Allied and Axis planning documents from 1978 resolved earlier contentions on Jeep losses and German truck failures. The most recent consensus, summarized in the U.S. Army's 2020 review, ranks the Safi engagement as a high-significance event for operational doctrine, credited with multi-metric improvements to timeline, casualties, and resource allocation. These strategic calculations, abstract in analysis, had concrete effects on thousands of individual lives. Franklin Ortiz, technical sergeant, 6th Infantry Regiment, who led Jeep-supported casualty extraction at Point 117, returned to El Paso, Texas, in 1945. After discharge, he reopened his family's auto repair business and devoted 26 years to veterans advocacy, specifically supporting combat amputees and mobility-impaired service members. In a 1977 interview with the Army Oral History Program, Ortiz recalled, "We made 2 trips under fire with the Jeep. There was no other way out. The sand wouldn't stop us, and that meant those boys got a second chance." Ortiz corresponded with 9 fellow veterans from his Jeep section. His detailed diary is preserved at the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center. Ortiz died in 1998, age 80, in El Paso. The Safi Point 117 Memorial, located on the outskirts of Safi, Morocco, was dedicated on November 8, 1992. Its designer bronze Jeep, emerging from a relief map of the Sand Ridgespace tribute